we're supposed to be serious here, but when I first got into politics 11 years ago, I was as tall as Temple Grandin. But it's wonderful, and Debbie, to you and your team, thank you so much for what we've had experienced over the last 2 or 3 days. You are on the front lines. Your family, your researchers, your scientists, your advocates, and I'm humbled to be here. I'm humbled also to be here as part of the Canadian family, because I do know that there is an international component to this, but we as a country went through a tragedy in the last couple of days, which my wife personally witnessed, and which I was on the Hill when all of this sort of thing happened. And as a reporter in the old days, I would never thought I would see this happening in our own front yard. So I think a day of innocence was lost because we think these things happen elsewhere. But we came together as a group. Mike Lake will be speaking, and he's a hero in the sense of bringing the autism word together through his son Jaden and through himself. And I just got a hug and a high five with Jaden. And yesterday there was a lot of hugging going along on Parliament Hill, and it was very serious. And I think that together as a group, we need a group hug too from time to time, I think each and every day, because we are all in this together. I had a prepared speech. I was trying to do a prepared speech, and then this thing happened. And I keep thinking of the soldier and his family and coming home to Hamilton. But this is, for us, my wife and I, beginning to feel like family. And I feel so much at home with you. I always like to talk about hope, about empathy, and about why we're all in this together. 7 years ago, I discovered a group of people searching to get their voice heard, to get the autism message out. Can you imagine one man standing in front of the Centennial Flame, a bureaucrat with his billboard-like sign saying, "Help me, help my son"? You don't see that kind of demonstration very often, but boy, did he ever get to me. And we stuck with it in the Senate. We do not have an autistic child, but we did have a Down syndrome son who passed away many, many years ago. And he is the hope and flame in our life, my wife's life and my life, in my work as a senator. And I never thought I'd have an opportunity to do this kind of thing, because I was a journalist for 35 years, and it's sort of easy to go out there and cover wars and things like that. The hardest thing is about watching the children and families of war and earthquakes and disaster. And I remember being in Cambodia, and I did a story on severely disabled children at a Canadian orphanage in Phnom Penh. And I wondered when I did that story, who cares for these children who have intellectual and physical disabilities? Who's going to adopt them, and who's going to take them to a better place like Canada? And very few do. And so when I did these reports, these are reports that stayed in my head forever, because I felt that if I ever had an opportunity in my life to do something else in my life, then here it is. And this is what I'm trying to do with you. Today, many people, groups, families have gone beyond the autism conversation to autism action together. And you are adopting, and they are adopting one another's practices. They are engaging with their governments. They are changing real data. They are involving scientists and practitioners and training more and more therapists. Today, we are looking at the whole person, the unique person, and his or her potential to play a real role in society. We are looking at jobs. We are looking at families, their health and wellness, and your health and wellness, because this is also a really serious health issue for parents and grandparents, and the anxiety and some of the issues of heart issues and cancer issues and real issues that are happening out there. It's all about our collective health as a group in this room and as a group in this nation. And 7 years later, there is real hope and real results, but we need so much more action. For my part, as I mentioned, I helped in this report called Pay Now or Pay Later, Autism Families in Crisis. And we proposed a national autism spectrum disorder strategy. It's something I still believe in. We need a national program. I do want to applaud the federal government. Here I am, a humble Liberal Senator opposition, but I will certainly applaud the federal government for many of its initiatives, including the tax credits on disability and research and surveillance and funding for chairs, employment opportunities through programs like Ready, Willing, and Able. But as a nation, there's still much more to be done. I was born in a little province called New Brunswick, and I was born in a little village called Woodstock, and not in New York State, but in New Brunswick, and I went to speak there a year ago. And Woodstock might as well be 1,000 miles from Fredericton and 10,000 miles from Ottawa. They invited me to come because they wanted to start up a group. They wanted to get together, mostly women, because this is, this is the world that we're living in, and grandmothers. And I sat in a small room near the fire hall where we sat one evening and I talked about what I do know, because all I try to do in my life is to connect us all and the rest of it. And we shared tears, and we shared, tried to share some optimism. And they can get all the literature they want, but if you don't have the programs in place, and if Fredericton, which is only 50 miles away, seems like 1,000 miles away, they called me last week and we're still struggling, we're still trying to do what we do. So in our cities of this country, yes, we're connecting the dots, and we're tweeting, we're doing all these things we're trying to do, but the simple act of transportation, of taking a child to be assessed in Fredericton, that simple act, it's so difficult. So I find that there are so many gaps that have to be closed across this country, and in rural Canada, particularly, that's an area that we really have to do what we have to do. I know there are some other speakers here that want to say a few words. Temple Grandin, if you're listening to me in the front row, if there's one thing I learned about myself, is now I can live with myself, because in grade 6, I didn't understand a word about algebra. I just didn't get it, and I was defeated, and I was going through all of those things. And when you spoke this morning, you spoke about, to me, common sense things, which makes common sense to every child. Get them working, get them doing things. I did have a paper route, and I was proud of that paper route. I even had money in my pocket then. It was that kind of thing, and so it's so much common sense, an argument that goes for every child across this country. And I really appreciate this morning. This was the first for me. I know for many you've heard the story, but it was the first for me, and boy, did my wife and I learn a lot. In closing, last week, my wife and I were in Calgary visiting a number of first-class organizations who are on the front lines of autism. And of course, there's the Ability Hub funded by the CNE Foundation, and it was 2 days of intensive behavior listening and trying and understanding to what was going on. But we also visited the Society for the Treatment of Autism. And lo and behold, we found ourselves in a special place where an intensive behavior therapist was, playing in a sensory room with a young boy by the name of Tahir. I can't get his face out of my mind. I do think I have a visual issue. Well, not an issue, it's a good issue. And I think maybe playing is too light a word for what was taking place, as most of you know in this room. This is about building blocks, the education blocks, the growing up blocks of a young man who will one day take his place as an adult in our society. So, in a moment, Tahir was in my lap. He had gone from looking at all the stimulation and the peaceful environment, and he jumped in my lap, and he was smiling and squealing. He was squealing with delight, and he grabbed my hand, and then we began to rock back and forth. We were communicating. We were, as they say, in the moment. Tahir is nonverbal, but he was talking to me, and I was in the moment. Now, I understand that 2 years ago with Tahir, there were no smiles. Look where he's gone. Look where he is. And we, as a society, have a moral obligation to build this country's future. And Tahir has to be part of it. We really are. We're doing this for Tahir and tens of thousands of others. We are all in this together. And I want to thank you for allowing me to share my moments with you. Thank you very much.